feature. This has happened before on this charger. The screen's dead, so it's just a whiteout on the screen. I mean, it's hard enough to see because the sun is blazing in it anyway. But it's you've got to remember what it's still working. It's just the screen's gone. So you've got to remember which buttons to press in which order. But something weird happened there because I'm sure I pressed the right button. Oh, maybe I didn't. Maybe I pressed the wrong button first. I thought I pressed the right buttons, but it was obviously trying to charge one of the other things. So, and then it started flashing red on the card, so there was a problem. Anyway, I rejigged it all, and then it seems to be charging. So, let's have a look. We are 9 degrees. It's a little bit warmer in up here. And what are we doing as far as the charge rate goes? Well, I have 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000, 9,000, 10,000, 11,000, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, right, 20 seconds. So we are charging at full 40, whatever. 20 seconds for 1 percentage point. You know you're charging now. I've been having so many problems with my stupid Dubry for connecting into the OBD2 socket. Yeah, it's not reliable. So I'm relying on my trusty old count up between percentage points, which has served me well over the last 4 years. If it's 20 seconds or so, you know you're running about 40 kilowatts power into the car. So yeah, working at full rapid speed, and in fact I could hear the fans whirring up just to keep things cool. It has not now I haven't actually used this charger for a while, but it's been so cold that when I have charged at it, it's tended to be a little bit slower because the battery's been so cold. So I've just been for a wee drive, maybe 10 miles down the country roads, going quite fast. So it's helped to, I'm sure, bring the temperature of the battery up a little bit. Plus the car's been sitting in the sun, so that'll no doubt help. Right, since my last video, I have actually, I've not touched the B meter on here. So this is after having the battery management system update. I have consumed 393 kilowatt hours of energy. I've done over 1,000 miles, nearly 1,200 miles, and oops, wrong way, let's go back that way. My average has been around about 3 miles per kilowatt hour, and a pitiful 14 miles per hour average speed. And it has kind of sorted itself out on the anticipated range. Just ignoring, not resetting it, just leaving it be. So the last few times I've been charging it, the temperature had gone down again to just sort of 2 degrees, 0 degrees, that kind of temperature, and doing a lot of round town driving, and it's generally been around about 70, 75. I don't think I've ever seen it below 70 miles on the range meter, the guesser meter. I don't feel like in the Renault anyway using GOM is quite right, because I've always felt it's not been as bad as in certain other cars, that it has really been a bit of a guess. So and then I did do a longer run down to Perth and back, so the car got a chance to warm up properly, and it was just cruising along. and it was cold. It was only about 3 degrees, something like that, but it got me down the 80 miles with, I think there was still 10 miles left on the clock. And I was a little bit anxious because it had only been saying 70 miles or something like that beforehand, 75 maybe. But of course it was fine because the battery hasn't changed. It's, you know, still got the same amount of energy in it. So yep, got down fine, came back up again, and then when I let it do a full charge after that, it was saying 90 plus miles on the anticipated range, because that would have been tying more with what it had just done over the previous 160 miles or so. Yeah, so I mean, basically it seems to be doing exactly what you'd expect it to do. So just leaving the B meter alone, it does seem to be kind of adjusting to what your last mileage of the 150 200 miles has been, which is what the car had been doing previously, but it had just in the previous 6 months, it really, with the colder weather, that did really seem to have made a difference to the kind of top range. So I've heard a lot of folks talking about the 2-pedal reset, which is this kind of artificial reset. So if you just reset if I reset the B trip computer on here, once it's fully charged, it would be whatever, 92 miles or 93, 94 miles, something like that. It would be anticipating on the range, which in good conditions, yeah, that is what you would get. Especially in this slightly warmer temperature. And some folks saying just don't ever do the 2-pedal reset because it's a false thing and all of that. Well, I generally agree, but there are certain situations where it's helpful. And my particular situation, I feel like, is one of those helpful ones, because if I'm going somewhere, and I want the range meter to be relatively, you know, giving me what I'm expecting to see, rather than being really negative what I'm seeing. I quite like using it because the first like 4 or 5 miles out of Aberdeen are all uphill. So if you're already at its kind of normal setting, and then you do that long climb, you lose a whole load of energy on that climb. And then for the rest of your journey, it's like you're catching up. Whereas if I do the 2-pedal reset, so it starts off with this, I totally agree, unrealistic expectation. By the time I've got to the top of that hill, it has kind of come down to basically a kind of level playing field, so that the rest of the journey, you know, kind of on. So there are some situations where it is actually quite helpful, but I grant you, these are unusual circumstances where it's quite helpful. All right, we are up to 53%, 35 minutes remaining. I think it was about 20%, something like that, when I plugged in. Still going at full speed at the moment. So the other kind of big bit of news that has been going around the EV world over the last couple of weeks, 3 or 4 weeks, really since my last video, I guess, has been, and the last video I was talking about the new Leaf and saying that I thought maybe Nissan have played a bit of a blinder with it in getting the balance, a really good balance between range, upfront cost, new technology, and all the rest. So there's been a lot of news, as if you are at all EV aware, you will well know, and I'm not really going to rehearse all of the discussions that other folks have been having about rapid charging on the 40 kilowatt hour new Nissan Leaf. But I'm finding it really interesting and understandable what's going on, I think.
And my main question about the whole thing is one of transparency, really, rather than that Nissan have done something inherently bad in their choice. I just wish they'd been a bit more upfront about it, I think is where I would be coming from. So I think those other vloggers or YouTubers who have talked about the battery management and the temperature management of the battery, I'm sure that is right. That is bound to be what is going on here. So this car, which has I think it's a 26 something like that kilowatt hour battery, 22 kilowatt hours usable. The new Zoe with the upgraded 41 kilowatt hour usable battery. These both have temperature management systems built into them, which, if I remember rightly, so it's an air system. There are fans at the back of the battery pack, kind of under the rear seat, which circulate air around the battery pack. So it's a bit different to some of the other, like the Chevy Bolt or the Tesla, where it's a liquid coolant that goes around. So I think in the Bolt it's basically the same coolant that's used, as a regular coolant that is used. However, it is, as far as I'm aware, I'm sure I've seen diagrams of this from a couple of years ago, it is connected to the air conditioning system of the car. So there is a it isn't just blowing air. There is a heat exchanger in the car. So it can, if things are really hot, it can channel cooler. I'm sure I've seen this. Now I'm second guessing myself on it, whether that is right or not. But I'm pretty sure there is a heat exchanger back there, and so there is a way for it to actually move some of that the heat around, rather than it just, so it's using air to go through the battery pack, but there is a heat exchanger as part of the fan system on the top of the battery. If that makes sense. I think that makes sense. And of course you do hear it when you're doing a lot of rapid charges. If the battery is hot, the fans will kick in. So at the moment here, I suspect the battery is only about 15 degrees or something like that. So it is not very hot. So the fans at the front of the car, under the bonnet, are kicking in occasionally to keep the motor side of things cool, the inverter and all of that, the electronics under the bonnet cool. But I'm trying to listen. I'm not hearing the fans in the back of the car running. But if it's hot, if you've been doing a long motorway run or something like that, or you're doing multiple battery rapid charges on a longer journey, yeah, those fans are whirring away. They kick in to keep everything cool. The reason for doing that, of course, is ultimately it's longevity of the battery pack. It's to keep the battery pack from overheating and then reducing the life of it. Now, in my last video, when I was talking about the Leaf, I think I did say that I was surprised that they didn't put temperature management system into the new 40 kilowatt hour battery pack. And I am still surprised by that when their partner Renault in the alliance does it with this car, with the Zoe, and with the newer Zoe, the 41 kilowatt hour Zoe as well. So the only thing I can think is that it's cost, that they've done it because of cost, and the battery pack is the same size as the old Leaf. The density of it, of course, has increased a lot, and so there'll be less space for coolant to work. But then, of course, they're talking about a 60 kilowatt hour battery coming up, which I believe is going to have temperature management, so it's going to have a cooling system. Why did they do that for the 40 kilowatt hour? It's really hard to understand, other than a cost issue. That's the only thing I can think, that they decided to make a compromise over the cost and thinking about people's typical usage. Where are we at the moment while I'm blethering on? 68%, 25 minutes to go. So, yeah, no problems with charging here at rapid rates. Yeah. So why would they have... sorry, I'm trying to... I'm out just on a drive, so I've just got my phone here. I don't have the GoPro. I'm sure some of you will complain about that. My apologies. Why have Nissan done this strange thing? So, I think what they've done, they've made a calculation, and it's a calculation I can understand. They've decided the bigger battery pack, for 99% of the time of most usage of the car, most drivers, is going to give them the mileage they need for all their day-to-day driving, any commuting, even, you know, jaunts to see family or whatever. And they might have to do one rapid charge along the way, but that is going to give you 250, 300 miles maybe of range. So that's pretty much what anyone is going to need for most of their driving. So in order to keep the cost down for people getting into that, into a Nissan Leaf, and I have to say, I do think the Nissan Leaf is very good value, as it is, the 40 kilowatt hour new updated Leaf, that this is their compromise they've decided to make. And in order to protect the battery pack and the longevity of it, if folks are on a longer drive where they're having to do multiple rapids, then to protect the battery life over the hot temperatures, they reduce the charge rate. So that is the compromise they have made. The 60 kilowatt hour one is not going to be as compromised, I would hope, for Nissan's sake, but it's going to cost a lot more. It's bound to cost a lot more if they're going to both increasing the battery density, the size of the battery, however they're going to be doing it, and if they're including temperature management. So there it is. To me, it's just where they've drawn the line on a compromise for the different variables in the equation of producing the car. And for the 40 kilowatt hour one, that's the decision they've made. So what I don't understand is why they haven't been clear about that and just transparent about it and said, you know, this is the way it works, and the car is good for this amount of range. It's good for one rapid or two rapid charges, but after that, it's you know, just be upfront and honest about it. Then folks know what they're buying, they know what the limitations are, and they can work around. Well, those limitations are fine, because the chances of me doing a 400 or a 500 mile journey are once a year or twice a year or whatever, and it's not going to really be a big issue. I'll just need to factor in extra time for that, or think about a different car that better suits my needs. Yeah, that's my kind of take on the Nissan Leaf whole shenanigans. I totally understand for those who have bought a Nissan Leaf thinking it would, like a previous model Leaf, would be able to rapid charge, you know, 5-6 times in a row on a journey, and you're laughing. Why they're frustrated, totally understand that, and I would be in exactly the same boat. In fact, I am in exactly the same boat, as are many Renault ZOE drivers, and it's nothing to do with the car, it's because of the chargers. So this charger here works at the full 43 kilowatts on AC, but many of the eVolt chargers that Charging Place Scotland have installed around Scotland do not. So, and it's even worse than the Leaf, because there you're limited to about 17, 18 kilowatts. So many of the supposedly rapid chargers, and I've moaned about this endlessly on videos over the last years, they are not rapid chargers. And so I'll turn up at one of those and it'll be an hour and a half to charge up instead of 30 minutes. And it is intensely frustrating. You're quicker going to a 22 kilowatt charger and bypassing the rapid charger. So I can relate, because it has hit me on occasions if I've been doing a longer journey and haven't had availability of either chargers that are set up properly or Ecotricity. They usually work fine at full speed. If you have a couple of other chargers that aren't working at the full 43 kilowatts, it really slows you down on your journey. And I know that having watched some of the videos of folks doing the longer journeys, that is what's happening with the Leaf. And then you get into the fascinating the sort of dynamic where, is it going to be faster with a car that does rapid charge every time, but with a smaller battery, than a car with a bigger battery that has the charging restricted over a certain time or temperature, battery temperature, whatever? Because if you think about it, to get to a certain destination that is, say, 500 miles away, you are going to need there is an average consumption. And that's really not going to change. It's going to be the same whether you're in a car which has a 22 kilowatt hour battery or a 30 kilowatt hour battery or a 60 kilowatt hour battery. It's going to be the same amount of energy that you use. Of course, different cars will have different efficiencies and all of that, but taking all of that kind of out of the equation, then it's really a matter of, it's like, you see, I'm a Formula One fan, so it's very similar to the whole situation about pit stops. Especially back in the day when you had to take on fuel at the pit stops, it's really thinking carefully about how much time it takes you to go in and out of the pit stop, to how much extra time the pit stop takes, how much extra fuel you have to take on. So if you're trying to do one pit stop, you would have to stop longer for the fuel than if you're doing two pit stops. But if you're doing two pit stops, you've got more time in and out, all of this kind of stuff. So you have the situation where, in general, you're probably going to be stopped about the same. You should be stopped around about the same amount of time for a given journey, unless in a bigger car you can run absolutely to your destination kind of empty. And so it probably kind of evens itself out. Unless you're in a car where the charging rate, the power from the charger is restricted. So if I'm going with another, taking a long journey with a 40 kilowatt hour Leaf, I am going to have to stop probably every 70, 80 miles for a charge. So what does that mean? It means on a motorway, I probably need to stop maybe every other charging, service station to charge up, whereas they could go another 1 or 2 longer. And then it's basically going to be about the same to begin with, because I'll be charging at 41, 40, 39 kilowatts. They'll be charging about the same kind of rate. Until we get to that point where their battery warms up. Now, for my 4th or 5th or 6th charge, I will still be charging at 40 kilowatts, whereas they're charging then at 21 or 22. So inevitably, they're going to end up slower. And even though I'll be stopping more times, as long as I don't faff around, I just let it charge at full rate all the time, and then once it starts tapering down, unplug and go. I would expect either that it would be about the same, or if once they hit the restrictions on charging, they're inevitably going to be slower. I mean, it's simple maths. It's not really it's not that complicated, and it's just because of the charging rate. But as I say, it's all down to what your priorities are, what you need out of the car. I'm just checking here. So I've hit. Oh, come on, focus. There it goes. Over 80% now. So the charging rate should be slowing down. So I used to find that basically before the battery management system update, it would chunter along pretty much 85-90% at full rate. It was only above that it would start to really reduce the rate. Right, that's 88%. It's just flipped over. So I'm just watching the timing here now to see what timing we're at. Now that's 10 seconds. Right, so it's just under a minute, 50 seconds it's taking. So that would be it down to kind of 18-ish, I guess, something along those lines. 18 kilowatts now at 89%. But it's still going up, okay, you know. And I was thinking, if I was on a motorway run, once it gets to 90%, well, I used to kind of wait till 95%, you see, because it used to keep going up at quite a clip up to that. But I think there is something quite different that's taking place with what happens at this top end. This may even be the first time I've done a proper rapid charge with the new battery management system on here. There you go. So, kind of going back to the discussion about the Leaf and all that sort of thing. It is one of those things that has really made me think about, like, upgrading the battery in this car, because I mean, there really isn't anything wrong with the car otherwise, and you know, at the moment, especially having had a few little things sorted at the last service, it's all running fine. Would I upgrade the battery on it? I mean, so yeah, of course, having a bigger battery would be nice and all of that, but for my usage, it just isn't really necessary, because most of the time I'm not charging every day. It's very unusual that would be happening. I'm usually charging every other day, and often just plugging it in for an hour, a couple of hours if I'm in a meeting or something like that. Plug it in for a couple of hours, that kind of tops it back up to 80%, 90% or whatever, and that does for another few days. And you know, just my usage on it, it's not generally running it flat and then rapid charging it, running flat. That is very rare when I'm on long journeys like that. But even if I was, although I guess it would be nice to be able to do 120, 130 miles all in a stint on the motorway, then I'd be waiting for an hour for it to charge back up. Whereas, and it comes back to this, when I did that long drive down to London and back, although I was stopping a lot, like every 50, 60, 70 miles, and it took quite a long time, I would still be stopped for about the same amount of time if I'd been in a car with double the battery capacity. And I noticed that because I was stopping so regularly, I was totally chilled. Didn't feel tired or sleepy at all, which was really much healthier. Now, when I'm in the diesel big Citroen, the Grand Picasso thing, of course I don't think twice about doing 300 miles, boom, in a go, because it's a different car, and just how you drive is completely differently with that car. How you drive is completely different. Even, let me get my grammar right. But when I'm in this car, you switch how you drive, and one way is not necessarily better than the other. They're different ways of driving, different priorities, and there are pros and cons to either one. I get that. Yeah, so I guess that's where I am with the whole rapid gate scenario, if that kind of makes sense. There's an awful lot of rambling in this one. I have to say that some of the videos around this have been absolutely fascinating. So the one that had, oh sorry, I don't have, because I'm in the car, I don't have the names of everyone there, but it was James and Jonathan, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the chap that was in the Ioniq. That was fascinating because of the efficiency of the Ioniq. That car on motorway runs really does seem aerodynamically, it must be really efficient. So I'm impressed, very impressed by it. So I'm still impressed by the Leaf. I still like the technology and all that stuff. I've had a look at one of the Leafs at the dealership here. I must try and get round to getting a test drive in it. Just time is precious and hard to fit everything in. And yeah, I just, as I say, my last point is just that one I started with at the beginning. It's one of transparency, and it's one of the things that I think Renault have been good on with the new Zoe, the 41 kilowatt hour, is being really honest about the range and saying this is the range you're going to get in winter driving, in summer driving. Just being honest with the drivers about it, what that means. Now, it's a bit more complicated for Nissan because, you know, having to explain to people that on your third charge, the rate will go down, and this does get a bit complicated for somebody that's a newbie just coming into EV driving for the first thing. However, transparency is always good. Being honest is always good with your customers about what the car can do, what its limitations are. Especially when you're on the cutting edge of the technology. There's my tuppence worth. Right, so I'm still got 10 minutes remaining here, and 94% on the charge, and yeah, still chunting away on here. I don't know if I've even been in focus for any of this last video, because I think I fixed the focus. So apologies if I'm out of focus for when I switched it around to point at me. Autofocus, there we go. Turn it back on again. Terrible at hunting. Must be time to get a new smartphone, clearly. There we go. That's enough waffles from me. But look at that. I mean, it's been terrible for days and days. And, oh, beautiful blue sky wherever you look. Long may this continue. All right, 95%. I think I'm about to unplug. I'm back. I thought, I've about a bit of time. I'll just leave the car to charge all the way up, just see what it does, because I've not actually sat in the car to see what happens. So I am at 97%. It's been at 97% for a while, and it's gone to time remaining 5 minutes. Now, I don't think it did that before, because this is where you second guess yourself. I'm pretty sure that once it was at 10 minutes, 15 minutes or 10 minutes was it? Then the next step, it went to the time remaining dash. Oh no, no. I take that back. It did that at 99%, didn't it? When it gets to 99%, it went to time remaining dash. But often at time remaining, it still said 15 minutes, if I remember rightly, when it got to 99%. So, here we go, 98%, 5 minutes. I mean, this is going to be really interesting here. Is it actually, right, so what's the time now? 4:28. Is it actually going to stop charging at 4:33? In my mind, not a chance. It's going to keep going for another 20 minutes or something like that
doing a bit of conditioning of the battery cells and all that stuff, or will it? So I'm actually gonna sit and see what it does, enjoy the sun, and if it does anything weird or unexpected, in my humble opinion, I will record it. You see, I clearly have time on my hands at the moment. Most folks don't do this, I'm sure. Right, this is now 3 minutes after I last was videoing. So when it went to 98%, it's just tipped to 99%, and it's done the same thing it used to do. It's gone to the dashes on the time remaining. So according to its sort of 5-minute scale malarkey, it would be done in about another 2 minutes, but I don't see that happening. I'm sure it's going to take a bit of time here as it does its conditioning, but we'll see. All right, 100%. Just as somebody else has arrived to use the Chanamo in their Leaf, and 4:56. So that was about 25 minutes it took to go from 99 to 100. That's exactly what I thought it would be. Yeah, a nice wee blether with the taxi driver there. So 100%, 70 miles it is saying. Yeah, so my last bit of driving has all been all pottering around town, and then I just had a blast down country roads at kind of full throttle, on and off brakes, and you know, heavy braking and all that. So that doesn't surprise me that it is not higher than that. What I am going to do, I'm going to keep the B average here and just keep that chuntering on, but I'm going to go to the A one and just reset that so it'll keep a tab on how many miles I actually do on this charge. And I'll see temperature's gone up 10 degrees. That's nice. So that's cool. Yeah, so it took 20-25 minutes to do the conditioning. So that is basically what it did before. So it does feel like in the battery management so far. So I know there are a few other folks who've had some issues with it slower on the rapid charging rate. This one didn't seem to be for me. It seemed to go up, and I couldn't actually tell the timing because the screen gubbed on the charger how long it had been charging in total. But yeah, it was about half an hour to get up to 95+%, and then from then on another 25 minutes to do the conditioning to 100%. So while I was waiting for it doing all the conditioning thing, I was reminded, and I had a wee look. So a couple of things, I double checked, and yes, indeed, the battery thermal management on the Renault, though it's not got water going through the battery as some do for cooling plates in the battery, there is a heat exchanger which does take a feed from the heat pump. So you do hear the air conditioning system, so it doesn't click in like in the car, but you hear under the bonnet the air conditioning system kicking in, the climate control system, so that it can send cool fluid down to the heat exchanger, which is at the back of the car for the battery. So it does cool the air going in, though it's air rather than water, cooled in the battery itself. I think I'm probably making this way more complicated than it needs to be. The point is, it does cool it. It doesn't just blow air around it. Right. Then I was reminded of an article I read, and I found it from like 4 years ago, of some leaked documents that had come out from Nissan. And I think I probably talked about this years ago now, when that information first came out, about the race that there was kind of internally between Renault and Nissan to produce the Leaf and the Zoe, and that the
Leaf production was pushed forward a year in order to be out first, which undoubtedly did benefit them on sales, though there was a big cost, and part of the reduction in time was not doing the battery management system for the temperature. Sorry, not battery management system, the temperature management system, or so these leaks said when they came out back in the day. I think it was somebody, Tavares or somebody like that, who was working with Nissan at the time. Oh, I might be getting some of these names wrong, but anyway. So yeah, there was, and I'd actually forgot all that. It just sprang to mind because of talking about all of this stuff. That, you know, there was this whole thing between Renault and Nissan, all part of the same alliance, of course, the same overall company or partnership, but who was going to get out first? So it does seem like Renault made the better decision on you know, waiting and making sure the battery had thermal management, because Nissan had to pay a lot of money in certain very hot climates to change battery packs, had to go to a different chemistry and things like that, even with their first batteries, and with a lot of degradation on those batteries, much more than you see on the Zoe. Yeah, so that is a bit of a weird one. That they didn't, still, it's surprising they didn't take the chance to change that. I still don't get it. Right, I'm off home. My little experiment on charging. Good to see the Rapid working. In fact, the guy, the taxi driver for the Leaf that is next to me, who was saying that there's a whole charging kind of park, something like that, about to open in Dundee. So the normal Rapid charge that I use a lot if I'm driving down to Glasgow or Edinburgh or something like that, is going to be supplemented by a bunch of other ones. So fingers crossed they are all working at full speed. So next time I'm down, I'll need to try those out. So I think it is either just opened or is about to open. So good news anyway. All right, I'm definitely signing off this time. Okay, happy EV driving. Talk to you later. Cheers now. Bye.